So before I play this episode for you, I'd just like to make note of two corrections that we made after having this conversation. Now, I've included these corrections as little texts that will pop up in the video if you're watching the episode. And this audio disclaimer is just for the benefit of those who'll be listening rather than watching. So, a couple of times, Midori, my guest, will mention an experiment that she's referring to, and she refers to the Zimbardo experiment in video when she means to refer to the Milgram experiment. And if you'd like to find out more about that, I've placed the link that she's shared with me in the description box below. And there is one time in somewhere in our conversation where I try to find in my dusty memory of the Malay language the Malay word for the old crone, our very own Baba Yaga. And I accidentally used the word nenek moyang, which actually means ancestor, instead of its actual term, nenek kabayan. And now that you have this news in hand, I welcome you to explore this beautiful and wonderful conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Art Diaries, my series where I explore the varying ways the intersections between art and healing can be expressed through different modalities and through different practitioners. So today I have, for the first time ever, I have a new friend who I'm so happy to introduce you to. She is Midori. I met her at a Zoom after party for a Sacred Wounds event. And we connected and we're doing an interview exchange as part of like a new collaboration thing that we're doing. And so for the past few weeks, I've been spending some time getting to know her work through her online presence. And what I understand is that Midori is a social practice artist. That's what she calls herself, a multi-disciplinary social practice artist whose work, and also a sexuality educator, whose work with both that with both the educational and the artistic side, I feel like her works really explore or deepen the exploration of consent, collaboration, and presence. So hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit about these things as we enter our conversation today. Midori, would you like to add anything as an introduction for yourself?
I really like the part where you picked up around the consent, collaboration, and presence. Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so before we begin going into some of the questions I have about the creative erotic, is what I'm going to call it for today, I just wanted to bring up the fact that you were born and raised in Japan, and then you
Mhm.
moved to San Francisco in the 90s.
No, actually, I moved as a teenager to the West
Oh,
Coast. And then
okay.
I moved to San Francisco in the early 90s after university. I went to Berkeley, which is just
Mm.
right across the bay. So yeah, so
Okay,
then
cool.
I've been here since in San Francisco. Mhm.
And you come from that multicultural background as well of Japanese and American, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was interesting growing up there. Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, as someone who is in Asia and dealing with still kind of navigating a lot of the shame that is force fed into the overculture of these landscapes. I wanted to ask, was how did you navigate that? Did you experience the shock of the culture as an entity and your personal relationship to your body, the culture's relationship to body and your relationship to your body? Did you experience any kind of dissonance or shock? And how did you navigate that when you made the move from Japan to the US?
Huh. All right. So, interesting question. Well, I chose to move to the US. Um, and I moved because, okay, as you can probably tell from my face, I am of mixed heritage. And in Japan, that doesn't go over so well, especially not when I was a kid. So yeah, I figured out pretty early on that my options were very limited. And because I have family in my grandmother US, I had the option of moving, which I took that. Um, Relationship to the body. There's positives and negatives, of course. Now, growing up, the neighborhood I did grow up in, we had public baths, right? So at the end of the day, um, I grew up in a tenement building and we didn't have bathtubs. Um, so we went to public baths. And this was actually common for middle class and working class. It was a common thing up until the westernization of domestic environments. So at the end of the day, the whole family would go to the bathhouse. Uh, Women and children of certain age go over here. Uh, Boys, men and boys of certain age go over on this side. And it was very communal and just the naked body there. And then I come to the US and there's like this weird hiding of the body. Um, yeah, it's funny when I go to Korean spas, I can tell the Americans because they're like showing up in a swimsuit in a jjimjilbang. Like, and there's a whole different thing on the body, right, about that. Um, on the other hand, in Japan, getting non-consensually felt up by women being felt up by guys was so common that their solution to the problem eventually was creating train cars that were colored pink just for women only. That doesn't solve the problem. So then over in the US, I felt that there was a lot more agency for women to have their possession of and speak for their own body. In terms of speaking up for my own agency, my rights, my pleasures. And of course, I'm in the West Coast. And then I'm in San Francisco, which was very much ahead of time around consent, bodily agencies, politics, and human rights. So, yeah, I ended up absorbing and learning that I am my body, and my body is not um, the possession of anyone else. So, but on the other hand, Americans are really weird about nakedness.
Yeah, that is true. That is
Yeah.
true. To be honest, like in my location as a Malaysian in Malaysia, I have this idea that people like that Americans are more free about nudity. And that's because that's what we're kind of we're fed this by the media and the dichotomy between the Western media and how prevalent and present it is versus everything else, versus any other media from any parts of the world. And because our overcultures try to create this kind of tension, and it's not a tension that's even like grounded in collaborative dialogue. Is a tension that's grounded in versus, right, us versus them versus us, to the point where like queer culture is seen as a Western agenda rather than something that has roots in our ancestry here and now. So there is this idea that like sexual freedom is something that only the West has access to. And that creates a disconnection that almost kind of feeds that cultural amnesia that is being kept up by the overcultures, that that kind of continuously gets our neurological landscape to forget that our ancestors were once sexually free, more so than what we're being fed by the West, or by the media's perception.
Interesting because, okay, so about 12 hours ago, I was having an interview with a Lithuanian writer from
Mm,
Lithuania for a German blog company.
mm,
And I was talking about, oh, there's so much better sex education in Northern Europe,
mm.
and talking about that, and so much more comfort and agency around the body. So, it's kind of funny that this is happening in 12-hour period for me, because American sex ed is not all that great.
Hmm.
Sure, there may be a lot of nudity on imagery. Now, when I'm traveling in, say, London, Londoners think Americans are prudes.
Right.
Yeah, and then if I go over to Denmark or Germany, they're completely comfortable with naked.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
um, clothing optional, all gender spa in northern Germany, in northern Europe, very common.
Mm.
So, and then Americans, I think of Americans as really being prudish. And
That,
there is a lot of skin in media, but I think that's
mm.
because of that conflict of that like puritanical background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I'm glad you mentioned the thing about uh, sexual freedom as well as LGBT identification as being a Western thing. Years ago, unfortunately, one of the terrible leaders of Iran, I believe, was talking about there are no gays in Iran. That's a Western thing. Now, all my American friends were like, "Well, that's stupid," and I'm like, "No, no, no. Pay attention to what he's saying because what, yeah, okay, he's stupid and he's a jerk. However, that's actually reflected and believed so, and activism as opposed to orientation are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And especially here in San Francisco, we tend to think of orientation, who we love and who we fuck, as necessitating political action. And
Mm.
that gets confused as being the same thing. So when the asshole leader of Iran said there are no gays and homosexuals in Iran, there's that's like a cultural window
Mm.
into a belief system.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that my American friends didn't just like think that was one crazy person,
Yeah.
that it's actually a worldview.
Yeah. There are, we had that something, okay, so I don't keep in touch with the news anymore because, mental health boundaries.
Yeah.
But there were times, I think it was a couple of years ago, that an article was making its way around my local community, and it was about a politician who said that there were no gays in Malaysia, and I was like, it's that it is, and it made me stop because usually, I do have a very clear boundary between me and the media. But certain things will come into my radar and it will make me stop and question certain things because it's bringing something up that I need to see about the location, my relationship with my present tense location. Um, and what I felt was someone erasing me, taking an eraser and erasing me from
Hmm.
the blood of this land. And that is that was the hurt that I felt. Oh. And that's not the only situation, but it definitely taught me a lot about how I've been treating my own body.
Yeah.
Because if the overculture, the voice of that says I don't exist, then how am I locating myself in my body? And that was a question that keeps coming back. The more I engage with my personal healing, the more I try to negotiate with the social landscape here, and also with what my art wants me to create, with what is like gushing out of me in my art almost uncontrollably. And I want to bring it back to how I feel about your work,
Yeah.
what I felt about your work. I was part of the audience, the interactive audience of Interface when you showed that the first time in Sacred Wounds. So I was one of the ones who drew the green squiggly lines coming out of your ears. And if it's okay, I would like to just play maybe a minute or two of that clip right now as a share screen.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you some questions about your practice.
Hey.
Okay. Okay. Let me just make sure the volume is not too high.
And for the viewers out there, there's actually music that goes with this sequence.
Oh, is the music not playing?
Oh, let's hear it. When you do share screen, you have to click on the bottom option that says play sound.
Okay, let me just try that again. I forgot to do that one bit. Sorry, guys.
So many options.
Okay, let's try that again. And let me rewind it just a little bit so we can see a bit of your face here and what's actually happening. So that's just a short extract from the
Oh,
interface.
so happy to see that again.
It's so beautiful. So for those of you watching, I will be linking the video of that from Midori's YouTube page in the description link. And if you're on Patreon, it will be in the text post that comes with this. And it's an interactive digital performance art on Zoom using the Zoom's annotate feature. So the audience were invited to draw on Midori's face. And there's this beautiful music that was playing in the background, and hopefully it came through the second time I tried. And there were a few times where the host of Sacred Wounds actually had to clear the screen because so many people were drawing. And every time I rewatch that, I always notice the "I am sorry" that came up in pink in the little bottom there. And it almost looks as if it was like overlaid on the heart area. And new things keep popping up every time I watch it. So if you're watching this, please take some time to check that out. And just imagine that it's live, right? Imagine what it feels like for you to watch it when it's live, because that was a profound experience. It was something I've never seen done before. And just a little bit of a background, I took some time off from any kind of engagement with any kind of art industry, whether locally or globally, for some time after dealing with some exploitative, traumatic experiences. So I needed that time to kind of just return to my body and heal. And again, it's that question of where do I place myself in my body? And with your work, I've noticed that the body really speaks in your work. And it took me a while to get that, because the first time, this was my introduction to your work. And then when I went through your website, and there was so much, like with what we wear, I think that's what it's called, the kimono, the one where you get the audience to choose whether or not they whitewash you. So if they're following the artist's advice, they were painting Midori in a kimono with white paint. And then if they weren't following the artist's advice, they weren't doing it, but they weren't like, if they opted not to do it, then they weren't honoring the artist's request. So it's a bit of it was the tension that was created with that was really brilliant, because it reflected a lot of tension that we experience on a subconscious level when navigating multicultural, like the multicultural and multidimensional aspects of our realities. So it took me a while to realize that what you're doing wasn't erasing yourself or erasing your body, but it was allowing your body to speak some of these experiences into visual language and into presence. Would you like to speak a little bit about that, and whatever you want to, like, take it and run with it, whatever comes through?
I am delighted with what you're noticing in my work, and I am just thrilled that interface resonated for you. it was coming up with that was a challenge because I'm an analog artist. My medium when I'm making things is like um, dirt and flowers and ropes. And recently I made a collage using fur and mirrors,
Wow.
very analog, right? And here I am in the middle of the pandemic, and Sacred Wounds has challenged me to create this piece for, create a work with a limitation of 5 minutes, and it has to be online and it's got to be able to be Zoom. Uh, and how do I do this when I'm so used to literally putting my body as the medium of the artwork, right? And how do I do this? How do I interact? I don't want to just be a performer where I'm making the viewers passive. What do I do? And I have to learn about the annotate feature. And I was like, And I figured out a way to put my body
Mm,
into the performance and to bring in the viewers from passive to being active collaborators
mm,
and the chaos of it. And it was interesting. I was proposing, I was talking about this with a friend of mine who's not a performance artist. And she was like, well, what would you do if somebody wrote terrible, hateful things on that? I'm like, it's not going to
mm, mm,
not going to hurt me. It's their truth in the moment.
mm.
Um, there's far more risk when I'm physically performing,
Yeah.
but it was such a thrill to figure out a basic technology that everybody has been using, forced to use.
Mhm.
And at this point, we were all zoomed out. And how do I use a medium that everybody's exhausted with in a new way? And seeing 200 people and with all the names popping up, it was exciting. And
Mm.
I wanted my face, my canvas, and my face I had gold painted. Oh, by the way, the sky in the background, it's not special effects. It's simple
Oh.
stagecraft. I set up my chair right before dawn, and that's
Mm.
the light of dawn reflecting on my face, and the window behind me reflecting the bay.
Wow.
It's not special effects. It's
I
complete.
didn't know that. I thought it was a digital background.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All it is the sun rising on a glass window, the glass
Wow.
pane window that's angled perfectly.
Was that intentional or was it just happened intentional? So you kind
Yeah,
of noticed that this happened at this time. Brilliant.
yeah.
I
And I
love
also
that.
wanted the rising sun as the rising sun of the new year,
Mm,
right? So invoking that. And
beautiful.
and with the interactive where I invite the viewers to become collaborators, I feel like a trickster because we've been so conditioned to don't touch the art, be
Mm.
polite, sit quietly, this is respect the art. And I make so many work that it's like, no,
Mm.
come on in, do the thing. I built like a 25-foot long rope tunnel
Mhm.
for a museum in New York for the Nobuyoshi Araki exhibition. And on the artist talk day, instead of just being art talk, 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 I showed people how to make basic rope connections,
Mm.
pile of rope, a bunch of scissors, and said, I'll show you this, and I'm inviting anyone to add your rope into my sculpture.
Beautiful.
And then we spent, instead of doing art talk, we spent 2 hours adding to my sculpture.
Mm.
It was such a thrill. And so many people, I don't know how it is where you are living, but so many Americans have been taught that art and creativity is for like special people. And
Mhm.
in Japan, it's like, there's more creativity, yes, but there's also the veneration of artists that they are special instead of more collaborative. And things that are collaborative making often get diminished as women's craft, like
Mm-hmm.
quilting, or for or labor, like
Mm-hmm.
repairing fishing nets,
Yeah.
building houses together. I was down in Oaxaca, Mexico for an art performance, and on the day off, we went to the beach. And I saw some workers putting fresh thatch on the roof. And while my friends are sitting and having, fancy drinks on the beach, I asked if I could help put on thatch. And I climbed up there, and they thought it was funny. This this gringa, right? And so I'm up there like weaving thatch and learning how to do this among these workers who tolerated me. And it was really neat. So I love that. I
That's
love,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, I love the trickster-ish of it, and
Yeah.
that patient.
Yeah. It's like the interweaving. So it's almost like when you let your body. So how I'm receiving that and how I'm understanding it is that when you allow your body to speak through you and through your actions, it almost by its very nature calls upon other bodies to speak to it. So there's a call and response.
Mhm.
Um, and you're using your literal platform, right? The stage of the artist to be like, you can speak with me too. Like, I want you to reply to me. And in that way, you're giving consent to the audience to create with you. And that's really beautiful. And I also know that it's really scary. Like you said, that if you were in performances where it was your body um, in front of a sea of strangers, and they are being asked to either paint you or um, touch you in some way or pull at you with ropes or add stuff to your body with material with mediums and materials that you've used. How do you negotiate the consent around that? Is there a team that you work with to make sure that you're safe? I just want to know the logistics of it, because yeah, I'm like, every time I think about performance art, like my social anxieties would get triggered, and I was like, I want to know, I would like to know, because I have so much respect for it. I want to know, like, what are the inner workings of the anatomy of that? Like, yes, you have to trust people, and then is there also, like the team to make sure that you're safe, or anything else that you're negotiating?
It depends on the performance.
Mm.
Okay, so I didn't go to formal art school. I learned and practiced and explored my performance art in nightclubs
Hmm.
like Torture Garden and Skin 2 Rubber Ball and Bondage a Go Go and these uh, fetish, goth, industrial, and punk performing spaces.
Wow.
So the physical risk there was much bigger because you got drunk people on drugs and
Mm.
dancing and sure, but also as the performer, I have power in the space.
Hmm.
By stepping onto that stage, even in a nightclub,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a far bigger risk, right? I now own the space. I am in the power position. Now, in an arts event, because of that cleaving of artist, I also have power. And
Mm.
they are waiting to follow, to experience, to receive.
Mm.
And thereby, I know my power that I have in the space. And so, what I do is I share it.
Mm.
And I think something of that presence comes through, that
Mm.
this is my space and I invite you. I share and I recognize my authority in it. Now, there are some performances where there's the safety is, I do have some safety staff because, like, I can't see. So,
Mm.
for example, in Kimono 2, what we wear, by the time I put on like 8 different layers of paint in a wooden mask and I'm painted, I can barely breathe. I
Mm.
can't, I've got paint in my eyes. The mask is painted shut. I have 2 tiny holes and I can barely breathe. Now, what you don't know in that video, you can go back and watch it, is I put little welts of tape. I wrinkled tape and put it along the floor.
Mm.
So I can actually walk through the space by touch.
Mm-hmm.
I actually can't see.
Wow.
So I'm walking with touch. And I practice my self-tie while being blind and painted and not breathing. I practice that. And so I'm walking, following it. So my safety spotters are to make sure that I don't fall off the stage or walk somewhere I don't.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, um, now once I had somebody on stage with that performance take a paintbrush and like slap it really hard on me,
Oof.
where I lost my breath.
Hmm.
Like I was essentially punched in the chest.
Hmm.
And one of my stage hands came up right behind me and just whispered, okay. And I gave a quick nod
Okay.
and just
Hmm.
continued, right? Um, so first of all, I recognize that when I step up on stage, I own it and I
Hmm.
own the space and the others are my guest.
Hmm.
And as guest, I see the audience as having been limited. Be polite, be nice, be quiet, don't touch, don't make a fuss. And so my authority is, it is my space. Here are the things you can do. You can do new things.
Hmm.
And using my body in an uncommon way. And I also know that by inviting the audience to participate with me, in a lot of ways, they are more anxious than I am because I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't even know what their emotional outcome is going to be.
Hmm.
I have an idea of it.
Yeah. That's so beautifully articulated in a
Now,
way that
here,
I've never heard of before. So thank you for sharing that.
thank you. The performance of who is who is your neighbor? I think that was the name of it. What was the title? It's the one where I'm in red and I'm being pulled by
Mm.
rope by the audience. Now that
Hmm.
was the one where I was really messing with the audience. Um, and the title of it, the Who is Your Neighbor, is based on the old biblical story of the Good Samaritan.
Hmm.
And the stranger, the Samaritan, rescued an Israelite and they were political enemies. Their nations were enemies. And yet the citizen of an enemy country saved a dying person, brought them back, and then gave them kindness.
Hmm.
The story of the Good Samaritan. Who is your neighbor, right? And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to put my physical body in the hands of the audience and then see who engaged in violence. I gave them the opportunity to engage in violence upon my
Hmm.
flesh. Who
Hmm.
will take advantage of that and who will rescue me? Who will engage in the taking advantage and exploitation and who will stand up for me? And what conflict will happen within those desires because those desires may be in the same person.
Yeah.
So I created a conundrum for the audience. And there's a moment at the end of the video where if you listen carefully, you'll hear somebody say, let her go.
Wow.
And I was like, yep, it happened.
Wow.
Because initially they're nervous, they take the rope and I've got a couple people planted in the audience.
Hmm.
Because if people don't take the rope, I've got a couple people that like take
Mm.
the rope and they pull me around. And the way that my wig is done, I put on the wig backwards. So
Mm.
I have no face. And when a person has no face,
Yeah.
people do a lot of things to the faceless,
Mm.
either literally without a face or having been erased out of culture. So initially they're tentative. And then they realize that this person you can do anything to. And this violence starts to happen. And then mercy. And then the revolution. Then the Good Samaritan.
Do you find that, sorry, were you going to continue?
All the while, I'm the one with the power in the room. Yeah.
What you said about mercy following the portrayal of violence or of chaos, do you find that mercy tends to open up only after the portrayal of harm? Does it happen before? Does it prevent it? Can it prevent it?
Well, my performance durations can be pretty short. It's almost like a social experiment. It's not unlike the prisoner's dilemma and the Zimbardo experiment. My background's in psychology. So it's a lot like the Zimbardo prison experiment, which was the violence in Nazi Germany just because of a few pathological individuals, or can ordinary people engage in such cruelty? Also, can ordinary people engage in kindness, generosity, and mercy? So I guess I never made this connection, actually, that a lot of ways I'm playing with the Zimbardo effect there.
Wow, yeah.
So yeah, thank you. I actually never made that connection because I'm creating an experiment through performance art, right?
Yeah.
The act of mercy or the act of rescuing, the Good Samaritan, happens when there is distress. Because if there's not distress, there's no action to be taken, right? And when there is distress, that some will exploit and some will rescue or stand up. There seems to be this wave, this emotional pattern of from what I've experienced, quite literally on my body, is tentativeness, a delight, and then overexcitement, kind of like a kid getting overexcited, right? And overexcitement with it, and going too far. And then somebody else comes in and goes,
yeah.
So
in that peak moment, do you find that what I see sometimes is a distortion, almost like a corruption of the excitement energy in it? For me, how I understand it as an energy worker is that the unintegrated shadows get unlocked, right? In that moment of heightening of sensation and heightening of aliveness, there's a moment where things unlock. The things that it's not so much that the boundaries break, but when it gets really bad, it can be, when it gets really intense, it can be boundary breaking and not in a good way. But what it does is it unlocks the walls that you've set up for yourself. And some of those walls are there as a defense mechanism against your own judgments, against your own shadow sides. And when that happens, it's almost as if a barrage of this energy comes through, and it kind of distorts the excitement. The excitement turns malicious, or it can turn
frenzy.
Yeah, or destructive, right? Because there's part of you that's like, maybe there's even something that you've been protecting yourself against. It's something that you need to let die within you, but you haven't seen it, you haven't mourned it yet. So it's coming in as a destructive force. Thinking about some of the Hindu deities and how some of them are very nourishing and caring, and some of them are wrathful. And it's the wrathful deities, the entities, that are the most protective, but they destroy before they protect. They destroy what needs to be destroyed before they protect. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this. Hang on, let me come back.
There is something to the frenzy, and that in
Mm,
that moment, right before the person in the audience said, "Let her go,"
mm.
right? There's a feeding frenzy. Are you
Yeah,
are you familiar with the bacchanal?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the festival, the original uh, Greco-Roman festival
Hmm.
of Bacchus.
Ah,
Look this up; it's quite interesting. So Bacchus was the god of wine, right? God of wine and god of party and the god of a few other things, but mostly known as god of wine and the party god. But once a year, it's so I have been told that there will be a gathering, a ritual in the forest by the women,
mm,
just the women. And it is a celebration of Bacchus.
mhm,
And a lot of wine would be consumed. And there would be one young man from the village that would be sent into this ritual. And the women are drinking, they're getting sexually free, they're getting drunk and all of that. And there's this frenzy of the religious ritual that's happening in the festival of Bacchus. And
mm.
it gets to a point where the frenzy gets to a point that they end up grabbing the boy, touching the boy, tearing the clothes off, and tearing him from limb to limb and consuming him.
Wow.
And these are the mothers, the daughters, the wives. Once a year, the festival of Bacchus and a bacchanal
Mm.
ends in that. And there was a place for that.
Yeah.
There's a place for burning the straw man. There's
Mm,
a place to contain the the monstrous. And yeah, I mean, we all have the potential for the drum of creation and the fire of destruction. Um, yeah, and I have I've always had a rather good relationship with my inner monster,
mm,
and part of that is because of my ethnicity, because of my mixed heritage. In Japan, I quite early on understood that my existence is monstrous,
mm,
that I am my mere existence, especially when, when I was a kid, Japan was a lot more, I mean, it's still incredibly racist, but there weren't that many foreigners there.
mm,
So I am something that should not happen.
mm.
My existence challenges Japaneseness. Um, so I've become comfortable with my monster. And
Mm.
also in my teaching side, I teach a lot around BDSM, and I also engage in a lot of BDSM stuff in that one has to get comfortable with
Mm.
and get to know one's shadow really well. And once you get to know your shadow, well, the way that I like to put it is get to know your monster and let the monster out, play a little bit and get familiar with it, pet it a bit, sharpen its claws, get comfortable with it. Um, because if you get comfortable with the monster and your monster gets comfortable with you, okay, there's going to be an advantage. Because if you deny your monster, if you hide it away, if you try to kill it,
Mm,
it will come back and consume you.
mm,
You don't expect it. But if you get comfortable with your monster, it's not like you're taming your monster, okay? It's always going to be wild. But when the actual enemy comes at you, when the actual threat, the real threat, comes at me, I can bring my monster out and bam, right up against.
mm. Wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so getting comfortable with your shadow, your darkness, the potential for the fire of destruction, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm making things, to make things, I have to destroy things. When I'm doing my flower sculptures, I'm murdering plants.
Mm,
Every time I cut a plant, I'm murdering it
mm,
to create artwork, and that's going to die.
Yeah.
and rot and decay. I created an 8 foot tall sculpture of Anubis, the god of the dead, Egyptian god of the dead. And I decorated him with flowers and put him in a window that sat there for 6 weeks where it was supposed to rot. But it was in LA, so it just dried
Wow.
like a mummy.
Wow.
Yeah. And the smell of drying, decaying flowers.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, so when I'm like making like the fur collage, I'm destroying things. I buy beautiful vintage kimonos and destroy it. There was one vendor who like would not sell it to me. She's like, "You're gonna destroy this. I'm not gonna sell you." There were other vendors in Kyoto, and I like to go to the flea market there when I'm back there. There was this vendor that sold lots of vintage kimonos, and I showed him my performance, and he's like, "Okay, try this. This is good." And there's bondage. Oh, very good. And he's like kind of a dirty guy, right? This one, and how about this one? Um, and he was really excited that I was making something, but
Mm.
I'm destroying beautiful garment. So I'm destroying as I'm making.
Mm. It's that
So
call and response again, isn't that? It's that
yeah,
it's beauty calling in its shadow side, and it's the ugly calling in its shadow side, which is beauty.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, sorry, I just kind of like got lost. I can so easily just get transported by any of your stories, and I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have so much fun replaying this.
And we're talking about like art as healing, right?
Yes.
Thinking about that because I have not thought of my work as necessarily being about healing. A lot of times I'm dealing with memory. I'm dealing with agency and body and all of that.
Hmm.
But because I do, you're right. There's an aspect of it that is healing. I know that the Kimono 2 performance has resonated with so much of the Asian diaspora. My my um my private nickname for that performance is the Angry Asian Woman performance. Yeah,
Oh, that's so needed. Like that is so needed today.
Angry Asian Woman, right? Performance. I'm like, okay, you want to whitewash me? Come on, do it. You know.
It's like I dare you.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you're right. I guess in a lot of ways there are healing aspects. My sculpture of invocation.
Hmm.
I don't think you've seen yet, but it's
No.
20-foot tall sculpture, and it's been on show 3 times so far, where I put out a public call for queer sex workers, either in past or present, that if they have objects of memory that they've been holding on to but they don't want to hold on to,
Mm.
that I will receive it.
Wow.
And then I will create a new artwork and I will weave that in. And I ask for however you define sex work,
Mm.
however you define it. I have 2 friends who are authors of pornography. They write smutty stories. And I ask them together, because we're all friends, do either of you consider yourself sex workers? And this was very interesting, right? Because when
Oh.
we think of sex workers, we might think of, porn actors or prostitutes or professional dominants or etc. But so here are 2 writers. One said, yes, I'm a sex worker because I write erotic stories for the purpose of erotic enjoyment, and I am controlled and limited by the government,
Mm. Wow.
right? The
Yeah.
other
Wow.
one said, well, I'm not a sex worker, but I'm adjacent to sex work.
Uh-huh.
So the woman who said, as an author, she's a sex worker, she found her original keyboard from when she first started getting paid for writing dirty stories.
Wow.
And I ended up weaving it in. Some of the items I received with stories and from friends and people who I knew their background. Other items I received, I have no idea. This box showed up
Mm.
with all sorts of costumes of like schoolgirl costumes and bondage equipment, and no return address, no name. And there was a note in it that said, "Thank you for unburdening me."
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so this entire box, and I'm like, a huge box of like clothing. What do I do with it? So I took the plaid schoolgirl skirts, cut them into long strips, and wove it into the sculpture as
Beautiful.
part of the rope. And all of these things. And I treated all of the workers and all the contributors equally, because within sex work, there's hierarchy.
Yep.
And nope. And this actually was not about, so often portrayal of sex workers in art is like, oh, the poor sex workers, the trauma. No, I wanted this treated as labor. This is legitimate labor. And as labor, people's hearts are involved in it. It's
Yeah.
labor in the way that a gardener is a laborer, a lawyer is a laborer, IT specialist is a labor.
Yeah.
So I created this sculpture. You haven't seen it yet, right?
I don't think I've seen it. No. I will have to go and see it.
I'll show you.
Yes. You gonna share screen?
Yeah, if I
Yes.
may. And let's see, where did it go? Looking for it. I have too many screens up. Let me make sure I have that open. And okay, hold on just a sec here. As I'm making it happen. Oh, I thought I pulled it up. Here, let's see.
You got it? Oops.
I'm almost there.
Hang on. Whoops.
Stop sharing just
All
for
right,
a
there you are.
Ooh, technical joy. Okay, ooh, technology, yay. Let's see, I have that up, and now I can share it. Okay, is it showing up?
Yes. See your page.
Let me go down to, there's the sculpture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's built so you can walk into it.
I was just about to say, I was like, is there an opening? It looks like a hammock.
Yeah, you can walk right into it. And it's made, I imagined a dressing room. Transformation from private citizen to worker to private citizen.
Wow, so it's like a tunnel, you can walk through it.
Oh, just walk in.
Just walk in, okay.
Yeah, it's a room with one entrance.
Okay.
And you look up and there's all these things hanging inside. Yeah, oh, and that's another interactive piece.
Oh, yeah, I saw photos of this and I was like, that looks amazing.
So this one is all about the memory of sex workers.
That's so beautiful.
There we go.
I'm like trying to see where the keyboard is. I can't see the keyboard. Is it like on the ceiling?
Yeah, it's buried in there. And I have some other videos of this where you can see all the work. And it smells amazing because of the hemp rope. But even that sculpture, in a lot of ways, for some people, contributing, trusting their memory objects with me, I think might have been a potential for healing.
For sure. For sure. I think it's so hard to find a place for certain things that have been part of our past or part of our growth, part of our transformation, part of our trauma healing. It's so hard to find a place for that to go, especially when it's imprinted into physicality, into physical objects, clothing, books, it's like, what do you do with it? Do you just like throw it in the trash? And that's kind of environmentally, irresponsible. So for you to open that up to kind of be like, I'm an art I'm a multidisciplinary artist with the skill to alchemize objects into art and alchemize memories into experience.
Alchemize. I like that.
It's almost as if you're like, let me help. Well, kind of like, help me help you do this.
Alchemize. Wow, I like that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to ask, have you experienced any profound personal healing moments with your performance art or with your visual in this process of alchemizing memory into art? Have you experienced any personal healing moments for you?
Yeah, I'd say yes. For example, kimono 2, what we wear, the angry Asian woman, is bringing that bringing that hurt and anger of like constantly being either erased or fetishized or projected upon, and just putting that right into the face of people, right?
Mm.
It's like, I'm not going to go in the corner and lick my wounds. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of generation upon generation of generation of Asian women,
Yeah,
you know, being
yeah.
treated that way. And I'm like, enough,
Mm.
enough. I'm going to. And so often, you notice that a lot of my artwork is I'm not speaking, it's
Mm.
silent. I am silent, which is funny because my day job of teaching, I'm constantly talking. I talk for 3 days straight teaching. Wonderful. Oh my God. But a lot of my performance is silence because I'm trying to express something that I cannot find words for.
Mm.
And by getting to perform it, at least it's coming out. I'm
Yeah.
not
Mm.
swallowing it,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And what I've discovered, especially with kimono 2, is that others feel like me as well. And other people have been um, relating to it.
Yeah.
So that's been profound. There's another performance. I have this character Yamamba, the old crone, and there was this performance that I did where, as the crone, before the performance started, in the character, I'm in the corner of the lobby of the theater with a beggar's mat and a beggar's bowl, just sitting there
Wow.
with a beggar's bowl. And so I put myself in the position of being, well, I'll never know what it's like to be a panhandler, to be out and trying to make a living through donations. I will never know that. But a little bit of it to get people uncomfortable, get myself uncomfortable in that interaction. And I wanted to see how people would interact with a strange looking woman with a begging bowl. And in my traditions, right? And I think in a lot of Asian mythology, you never know when the gods show up.
Yeah.
And you never know when they show up in rags.
Yeah.
So I put myself in that mysterious character's position. And you know what was amazing was people, I didn't know what they would do. I had no idea. So I sat there and some people came in, put money in the bowl, and then sat with me.
Wow. Wow.
And I maintained character. And what they didn't know is I was paying attention to who gave the old woman money.
Yeah.
And then in the performance itself, okay, um, in that performance, I then showed up on stage as the mad old woman with this basket of 3 giant salmon, whole salmon, and I'm taking a big salmon. I'm taking the knife and I'm slicing it open. And the first one, I pull its guts out and I'm just eating it. Right?
Wow.
It's, it's, I got sushi grade salmon, don't worry.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
Oh, no. I'm picky about my fish. But Americans are really funny about fish. They're like, ooh, food with face. They're really funny about that. Like, if it's not fish sticks, they're like, no. And then the second salmon, I sliced open and pulled out jewels.
Wow.
Not
Hmm.
real jewels, but stage jewels.
Yeah.
And the third salmon, I sliced open and pulled out, and I did it almost like a magic trick, pulled out fresh mums.
Fresh what?
Mums, chrysanthemums.
Oh, okay. Oh.
The flowers of the Japanese
Yeah.
imperial hearts. But they
Okay.
come wrapped in like what looks like a net.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
just took the flower, it's a net, and I had the nets in the fish that I had sewn back up. So as I pull it out, the nets come up and it blooms.
Wow.
And so I took the jewels and the flowers, and then I went out to the audience, and I started climbing over the audience. And yeah, climbing over the audience. And to the people who gave the old woman money, I gave them jewels and I gave them flowers.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then the old lady just walks out of the theater.
Wow. That is amazing. That sounds like so much fun.
It was totally fucking with the audience. But I also wanted to see who would come and experience the strange person.
Yeah.
Who would sit with them? Who would interact? Who would ignore them? And in the process of working that character and working up that performance, I found myself watching, because San Francisco has a lot of unhoused people
Mm.
and people who are asking for alms and donations, right? So I started watching the people that others don't watch.
Yeah.
So I would sit and watch people who obviously had mental health issues or were unhoused for whatever reason. And I would watch them and how the others would watch them. And then I had to confront my own blindness and
Mm.
how I would also turn my face away,
Mm-hmm.
right? When somebody's like, can you spare a dime? I had to confront that. And I had to confront how I feel I do when somebody who is in the throes of a mental health crisis. What do I do? How do I react? You know? So I don't have an answer
Mm.
for the best practice, but I had to look at my own failings.
And is that where the characters come from, especially with that one?
Oh, that character's been with me since 1998.
Wow.
It's based on a Japanese folkloric character, the mad woman in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And every culture has the mad woman at the edge of civilization.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Crones, they're witches, they're
Over,
dangerous
over
women.
here we have Ninit Moyang, I think, or oh god, I can't remember the term. But yes, we have a few actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just an old lady living alone in the edge of the forest. Sometimes they're not. And when the villagers want their fortunes told or they want a baby, they come to the old woman. But the moment that the crop dies or the baby dies, who do they go after? Right? And she literally lives at the margin of the civilized and the primordial.
It's amazing how much responsibility gets thrown into people who live in the in-between spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you exist, you're wrong. If you don't exist, where do we go to for the bridge, to experience the bridge between the etheric and the physical? Yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to ask about any processes that you might have in terms of the aftercare of post-performance aftercare, where it's like, how do you recalibrate your boundaries? How do you recalibrate your relationship with your body after offering it, making it an offering in that way?
God, thank you for asking that. Thank you, because yeah, um, after I come off the stage, I am high.
Mm,
I am high. I'm elated. Um, Oftentimes, I need to shower a lot because I
mm,
will have paint up my nose and in my ears and in places where it shouldn't be. I have to wash my hair. Um, so there's putting all the things away, but literally taking the character off of me, right?
yeah.
Um, and taking the character off, scrubbing it off. I'm often quite hungry,
Mm.
and I'm high, and then the high comes down, and I'm like, oh my God, did I do okay? I could have done this and that so much better. Oh my God. And I didn't get the documentation right. The promotion wasn't right. The coordination.
Oh God, I hate that part.
That will happen, and that's a bummer. Uh, yeah. So now after, what was interesting was uh, there was a performance where I didn't actually put my body online, but I had a tremendous post performance drop.
Mm.
And this is the installation called the dining room,
Mhm.
where I invite people to a shatter party where they get to break dishes, right? And they one by one they go up to this corner and break dishes, and break and break and break. And I take the fragments and create a carpet
Mm.
and a dining table with broken dishes glued back together
Mm.
on top of it. And the first time we did that, the next day, um, and I had assistants who were helping, and this is just show people to the piles of plates, and then they get to break it. And I didn't think I would have the sort of emotional up and down that I do in physical, as I do in physical performance. But the next day, I felt, sorry, the cats are being dramatic. Um, I think the older cat is actually playing with the baby cat. Huh.
Yay.
Sorry, I needed to pay attention to make
No,
sure
it's
there wasn't
okay.
bad going on. So afterwards, the next day, I woke up feeling like literally hungover.
That like an energetic hangover.
Yeah, and I was like, why am I hungover? I didn't drink. I slept. Why am I hungover? And then I happened to call one of the assistants, and she was also, yeah, I'm like really not feeling well. I'm like, oh,
Wow. Hmm.
I know what happened. We actually took in, I mean, people were like shattering out of anger, shattering out of grief. I mean, one woman brought the wedding china from her mother's first marriage,
Oh my gosh.
not good marriage, the
Oh,
whole thing, like still
wow.
in the containers, right? Oh my God. And so what I realized was that those of us who were hosting it just took it all in.
Mm.
I did
Hmm.
not know that would happen. Had no
Wow.
idea.
Yeah, no, that's real.
Yeah.
That is so real.
So the next time I did that, I got to do that installation 3 times, and I hope to get to do it more. Next time I did that, I warned my volunteers,
Mm.
this can happen. Be prepared. We're going to be holding a lot of people's shit.
Mm.
So do whatever you need to, either this way
Mm.
or to take care of yourself afterwards. But be prepared. And if you're
Hmm.
especially sensitive, really be prepared.
Oh yeah.
I'm not particularly sensitive, and I was like,
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, yeah. So what did you do to help you reground after that? Or what did you learn from that in terms of like the regrounding after performance or after hosting,
Yeah.
holding space? Yeah.
What I realized was that a lot of shit's gonna come up, and if I know that that can happen, it's a hell of a lot easier to deal with it.
Mm,
In my physical performances, I know that can happen,
right,
right?
right. Mhm.
So, but in that sculpture piece, I didn't know that would happen. So I was hit by it unknowingly.
So it's almost like your awareness informs the capacity with which you show up with. So it's like if you're aware of it, then you're only going to show up for it when you have capacity to hold that space, and then transmute that space or close that space in your own way. Um,
And same with the invocation.
mm,
And by the way, the name is playing with both being in a vocation as
mhm.
well as invocation as a ritual, right?
Right. Yeah.
I borrowed a lot of the symbology from the Shinto retirement of broken sewing needles. Once a year,
Wow.
broken sewing needles would get retired and taken to temple or shrine and given thanks for the work, the hard
That's
work that they're doing.
that's so
So
beautiful.
yeah, um, but in creating invocation, I knew that I was receiving a lot of people's memory, good
Yeah.
ones, bad ones, memories that they've never spoken, in objects. I may not know the stories. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I receive these, and I have to be prepared. Because in that position, um, I am a secular priest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like the priests at the Shinto shrine or the monks, but in this case, I'm a secular priest.
Mm.
So, I need to be prepared for that.
Does that involve leaning on support systems?
Yeah, and you know what? My colleagues are amazing. My friends
Mm.
and colleagues who are artists and fellow queerdo artists who do weirdo art. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that
So,
connection. Would you say that is the connectivity of the support system is one of your grounding channels or one of your restorative channels?
it is. I'm eating well. That too.
Yes, yeah. Food is very grounding.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what else is getting to talk about the work.
Yeah?
Yes, yeah, getting to talk about the work because okay, so I'll do a performance or an installation, and there's the initial elation, but there's all the feelings that happen along the way because they never leave me. It's like I may finish a performance, put it in a box, or finish an installation and put it in quite literally in garbage or recycling, right?
Mm.
Uh, and still the effects of it are with me. So whenever I get to talk about my work, like I'm getting to do with you, um, it is an ongoing grounding and processing and
Oh,
taking delight in it. And oh God, there's nothing quite as good as talking to somebody who experienced my performance or installation or work and getting to hear what they experienced.
mm.
It's so fun
So
and
that
so.
is the way that the art lives after you've created it.
Mhm.
The continuous breathing of the life force of the artwork. That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that talking about your art is part of your restoration process. I come from um, like a background of really struggling to talk about art, really struggling to own the self as a creator, as an artist, and to do that even with certain odds against you, right? Um, and it's funny because like this whole series is actually one of the assignments I received when I was doing a channeling with the Akashic Records. This is one of my personal soul assignment to create this series and to through this series and through the conversation, learned to talk about all these different aspects of art and healing. And it was really funny because now I'm seeing, like, you just basically gave me like a piece of the puzzle in terms of like, why is this important? Why should I be doing this? And it's that allowing the talking of the art to be a restoration practice as part of our creative self-care. Because it's not just for documentation, it's not just for other people. That part, documentation is not just for other people, it's also for us to really kind of affirm and allow the art to continue its breathing in this world. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, and thank you for letting me talk about this, because every time I think about it or talk about it, I get a new facet, another understanding. I see, like, I never made the connection with the Zimbardo study with the way that I fuck with my audience. Create these conundrums, right? I've never heard the word alchemical associated with my work. I was like, wow, it is that. So even as the physical work is gone, the actual like temporal performance has disappeared. It gives me more things to think about. And like, you know, I was talking about getting comfortable with my monster, you know, understanding it more.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, it sounds like the continuation of that call and response again. It's like, it's a call and response between you and parts of you, and it's also a call and response between you and the audience. And when you're talking about your work, once, like you said, the temporal aspect of it is kind of like closed, that closing opens another doorway, another response. That closing is a call for the response of the art living as art within the documentation, within the way it lives in our memory, and how it evolves and the dialogues that it calls into existence afterwards.
I am so loving this conversation. Oh my God, thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you have any, do you want to share any closing remarks before, because we're almost at time?
Oh goodness. Well, everybody's creative, so you know, years or whatever it takes. And I actually am doing a lot of collaborative work, and I actually have a project coming up that's requiring public participation in helping me to make this giant recycled material sculpture. So stay tuned to my Patreon and my social media, because I need everyone's help to make this ridiculous sculpture happen. I'm going to be creating a representation of the 7 tectonic plates of the world using recycled material and parts of plastic bottles.
Oh, wow. Okay, we can talk a little bit more about that after. Once I stop the recording, I want to hear a little bit more about this just on the side. Okay, so I will post all the links, your website, Patreon. So if you want to follow Midori and check out more of her works, I've got you. I'll hook you up. I wanted to ask if the installation is happening because this episode is going live in July. Is that still okay timeline for people to want to join in for that?
I'll still be making at that point. I will
still be good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then it'll be up for a year.
Wow. That's so cool. Okay.
But I will need the public's help. And then you get your labor of creativity will be part of a sculpture in San Francisco.
And it's globally, you're also accepting global collaborators. Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Plastic bottles are unfortunately everywhere.
Yep, unfortunately. And on that note, thank you so much, Midori, for your time, your wisdom, your stories, and your beautiful, beautiful art. I am so grateful that we bumped into each other in the way that we did. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this conversation, where this collaboration, and where this interaction leads us to. If it leads us anywhere, I'm open to it.
I'm looking forward to interviewing you for my Patreon.
Oh yes, that's happening. More info on that soon. All right. Thank you everyone for watching, for listening. And I hope you had so much fun listening to this conversation as much as I had being part of it. Thank you.